Welcome to The Point, a podcast by Apex Benefits and dedicated to employee benefits thought leadership. You can find more episodes for free on iTunes by searching The Point or Apex Benefits. Please rate, review, and subscribe to be the first to know about what we have in store for you. To learn more about Apex Benefits, please visit our website at www.apexbg.com or find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. Let's get to the point together.
Welcome back to The Point, Fort Wayne. I'm Kassee, Lamm, Benefits Strategist with Apex Benefits, and today I'm excited to have Adam Bartrom, partner with Barnes and Thornburg here in Fort Wayne, as well as my colleague Scott Long with Apex Benefits joining me. Welcome to the podcast. Adam and Scott, would you two take a second and just introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name's Adam Bartrom. I am a lifetime Fort Wayne native. Went to a local graduate here of Bishop Dwenger High School, and then went to St. Joe Rensselaer for undergrad and Notre Dame for law school. Go Irish! And I have been practicing here at Barnes and Thornburg in Fort Wayne for almost 14 years. And my wife is a transplant from Sarasota, Florida. She came up here to work for Vera Bradley years ago, had the misfortune of meeting me, and has been stuck here ever since. Something she likes to bring up during the winter in particular when she asks why we live here. But we've got 3 boys. They keep us busy, and we love it here in Fort Wayne.
Welcome, Adam. Hey, so Scott Long, I'm an executive advisor with Apex Benefits, been with Apex for about 7 years, and work with employers of all types, higher ed, privately held, and so forth, predominantly in central Indiana and Fort Wayne. Adam, my parents were born and raised in Fort Wayne, and so some of my most fond memories of in the 90s anyway is playing Bishop Dwenger. I was a North Central soccer guy in the mid 90s, so we slugged it out a few times with your side. So it's good to meet you and good to have you on The Point, Fort Wayne.
Excellent. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks for being here. So Adam, you're dedicated to ensuring that your clients understand the changing employment environment, and obviously that's in order to adhere to the law and ultimately protect themselves. But when it comes to labor and employment law, what are the 2 most frequently mentioned challenges that employers are facing right now?
That's a good question, because I don't think there's just 2. I think there's handfuls and handfuls. Employers right now are trying to balance so many things. They're trying to balance keeping their business afloat with keeping their employees safe, keeping their employees protected, while also balancing, customer needs and how they're keeping customers safe through all of this. So I don't think there are just 2 things. I think there's 25 things, and that's probably the biggest challenge for employers, is trying to keep up with the speed in which things are changing on a daily basis.
What are some tips? I guess I was thinking your clients are probably in a similar situation to ours. They're getting hit with 10 emails an hour that are devoted to keeping them current. If you had to say, look, they need to be aware of these 3 laws, right? They need to have kind of good handle on the top 3 pieces of legislation. In your mind, what would those top 2 or 3 or 4 be?
Sure. So the biggest one is going to be for employers who have 500 employees or less. And that's the FFCRA. You may have heard about these new paid federal leave laws. Mm-hmm. And these are unique in as much as, leave under the FMLA is usually unpaid. So this has been kind of a paradigm shift with these new laws, and they provide for employees to be able to take paid leave in certain amounts for various situations, including, getting a COVID diagnosis or being told by a medical provider to self-quarantine, or maybe they're taking care of a spouse who has a COVID diagnosis, or there's also childcare leave, which allows for parents whose children are, their daycare is closed or their school is closed due to COVID reasons. They may be eligible for leave to stay home to watch their children as well. That is definitely the biggest thing that I think, again, employers of 500 or less employees need to have on their radar, because the DOL is coming out with guidance constantly. It's kind of the wild, wild west, because you've got this brand new law that was written pretty quickly that's affecting so many employers, and there's not this body of case law or this really developed area of regulations that provide guidance to employees. So we're going back to Scott's point. I mean, that's one of the most important things I think if they're going to keep up on, it's these new paid federal leave laws.
Yeah. There was a moment in time that legislation was in the making, and then maybe 24-hour cycle later, it was done. It seemed like it was overnight that it was crafted. Yeah,
I've joked and I say this in jest, but it seems like the law was written on the back of a napkin at 2:00 in the morning, and part of that's just because of the unique situation we're in. I mean, Congress had to move quickly to get it pushed through, and it's hard to plan for all of the contingencies and unintended consequences that come from these laws. I mean, I think one of them, under the CARES Act, so different law, but under that stimulus package, it provides for employees they could be eligible for an additional $600 in unemployment benefits a week. So when you take the Indiana cap of $390 and you add on the $600, you've got some employees who are making $990 a week in unemployment benefits, which is more than they would otherwise be making if they were working a full 40-hour week. I think that's either one of the unintended consequences, or one of them that they just said, hey, the policy behind this is we got to put some money in people's pockets to try to offset this economic downturn.
Yeah, it was a conduit to getting it done.
So, Adam, as we get back to our new normal, it's not really our old normal anymore, what would you say are some best practices or some things that employers should be aware of as their employees are starting to return to work?
Yeah, no, I think what employers are going to find is that the transition back to the office is much more difficult than the transition to go remote. You go remote, you got to make sure people have internet connections, laptops, maybe a printer. But for the most part, if you're working in an office setting, you can probably do your work from home. Now, as we try to reopen offices, one of the best practices would be to have a plan, like have a well thought out plan. And there's various checklists out there that you can utilize. I know our firm's put it together. Kroger actually has a great document. It's called Blueprint for Business. And what it is it's a living document that they're continuing changing and updating, and it's sharing the lessons that they've learned through being an essential business and staying open to both balance business needs and to keep their employees safe. So having a checklist, and you may be aware the governor's order requires all Indiana employers to have a plan. Whether they are continuing to operate as an essential business or they're reopening, there are requirements in that new order. Now, they're relatively minimal, social distancing, cleaning, employee screening, but employers are required to identify how they're going to implement those three things, and then they have to provide that plan to employees. But obviously it goes well beyond just those three things.
No, I appreciate that. So it's a really interesting point. We'll make sure that we get the link to the Kroger information as well in the episode description. But you mentioned documentation and then disclosure to employees. Circling back to your point about the paradigm shift, you've got you now have a situation where you're talking about in instituting paid leave, whereas many employers have not gone there. In fact, they've, for years they've had it documented that we don't have a paid leave. So for our listeners that are maybe looking for resources or at least a better understanding, what my question to Adam, what are you seeing from your clients and folks that you're talking to about how to document that paradigm shift?
No, that's a great question, because the reason it's important is that if most employers, when they're paying out that paid leave, they're eligible for a dollar for dollar tax credit for that money paid. Now, we've got some guidance from the DOL on that. We've got some guidance from the IRS on that. And unfortunately, they've worked a little bit independently and not necessarily collaboratively to give a list. But the IRS has provided some guidance. And I mean, what I would just recommend, what I have recommended to my clients is, make sure you're really documenting that, where we're keeping track of the exact amount that was paid, and make sure we're designating that in our payroll system. That way, when it comes time to get that tax credit, we're not running afoul of any kind of IRS guidance. So documentation of exactly how much was paid per employee, and it being per these new paid leave laws is very important.
I appreciate that.
So Adam, as we discussed documentation, that's obviously something that would lead to a pitfall for an employer if they're not keeping documentation. Are there any other pitfalls that you would say for employers to watch out for aside from not documenting things?
Well, I think they just need to make sure they're up to speed on how the paid leave laws work. I've had a few interactions with the Department of Labor over the implementation of these new laws, and it's just important for companies, particularly if they don't have a designated HR department, so they're not used to administering these types of leaves, that they're up to speed on the requirements. And there are, in terms of documentation, there's the documentation for tracking the paid leave, but then there's also certain documentation that employees are required to provide in order to substantiate their request for leave. The employer's not just required to take their word for it. There is, depending on the type of leave, certain documentation that an employer can ask for while they're evaluating that request for paid leave.
Good insight. Really appreciate your time, Adam, this morning. I know, right now time is of higher value than it ever has been before. We're not doing a ton of driving, right? And so we're squeezing a lot into our day. So we really, Kassee and I really appreciate you coming on to the Point, Fort Wayne.
No, enjoyed it. It was fun. I appreciate you guys having me.
Thanks, Adam.
You can find more episodes for free on iTunes by searching The Point or Apex Benefits. Please rate, review, and subscribe to be the first to know about what we have in store for you. To learn more about Apex Benefits, please visit our website at www.apexbg.com or find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. Let's get to the point together.